ちょっと待っだけど
This story begins by introducing us to its main character, Fujinuma Satoru, a 29-year-old man who works as a pizza delivery man after failing to become a manga artist. But Satoru was no ordinary person. He sometimes experiences a phenomenon he calls revival. When revival occurred, it meant that an accident or incident would occur nearby, and he would be sent 1 to 5 minutes in time to prevent it. If he failed to do so, time would keep repeating itself until he managed to thwart the incident. One day, while Satoru was on his way to deliver pizza to a customer, he suddenly experienced a revival that reverted him 1 minute back in time. And so, he started looking for something odd around him, which might have been the cause of the impending incident. It didn't take him long to find it. It turned out that not far from him, there was a truck driver who fell asleep while driving. The worst part is that the truck sped toward a boy crossing the road. If Satoru didn't stop the truck, the boy would surely die. In the end, Satoru managed to prevent the accident from happening. However, as a result, he was the one who got into the accident, causing him to be hospitalized for 2 days. After he is discharged from the hospital and returns to his apartment, Satoru finds his mother, Sachiko, coming to visit him. But because she was worried about her son's condition, she finally decided to stay a few days at his place so she could take care of him. Later that night, Satoru and Sachiko see news of a kidnapping, which reminds them of an incident 18 years ago in their hometown in Hokkaido. At that time, Satoru had a neighbor named Yuki, a 23-year-old man who often played with him. But one day, Yuki is arrested on charges of kidnapping and killing 3 local children, 2 of whom are Satoru's classmates. Even so, he never believed that Yuki was the culprit. He always trusted Yuki as if he was his older brother. And his hunch was right because the next day, when Satoru and Sachiko were out shopping together, Sachiko saw a man who seemed to be trying to kidnap a child. She felt like she knew the man, but she couldn't remember who he was and where she had seen him. On the other hand, the man recognizes Sachiko and remembers her, as evident from how he gave up his intention to kidnap the child after he saw her. In fact, the man was the perpetrator of the kidnapping and murder of 3 children in Hokkaido 18 years ago. After all this time, he is still unsatisfied with his criminal actions. Sachiko, who is still curious about the man, decides to remember the case 18 years ago and reinvestigate it at Satoru's apartment. Incidentally, she is a journalist who helped investigate the case of the kidnapping and murder of the 3 girls. Then, after looking into that matter for a while, she finally concluded that the man was the real killer from 18 years ago. Unfortunately for her, the killer turned out to be quite smart. Before she could tell anyone about her theory, the killer came to Satoru's apartment and killed her inside. Satoru was not in the apartment at the time of the murder. He only found out that his mother had died after he came home from work. And in his panic, he accidentally touched the knife the killer was using. At the same time, the landlady entered his apartment at this moment. She immediately screamed in terror when she saw his hands covered in blood, thinking he had killed Sachiko. Satoru realized it would be difficult for him to explain the misunderstanding to the police. So, he chose to run away from the apartment until he unexpectedly experienced revival again. But this time, he didn't just go back a few minutes. He was sent back in February 1988 when he was 10 years old and in elementary school in Hokkaido. That means the kidnapping and murder cases haven't happened yet. At first, Satoru was confused as to why this was happening. However, he realizes this is his chance to save the 3 children before they are kidnapped and, at the same time, change the future where his mother is murdered. The first step Satoru took to fulfill that goal was to keep an eye on Hinazuki Keo, the first kidnap victim. For that, he makes an excuse that he likes her to make his friends help him get closer to Keo. And his efforts ended successfully. One day, Satoru notices bruises on Keo's neck and legs, making him suspect that she has been abused at her house. Knowing that he reported his suspicions to his homeroom teacher, Yashiro. To his surprise, Yashiro had already suspected that Keo's mother, Akemi, had abused her for almost a year, and he had reported it to the Child Protection Center. However, Akemi was clever enough to cover up the evidence of her cruelty. For the next few days, Satoru kept an eye on Keo. He knew that she was kidnapped on March 1, 1988, so he took her to the museum on that date, hoping that he could protect her from the kidnapper and prevent her from being tortured by her mother that way. He even guarded her front door all night. In the end, March 1st passed without anything bad happening to Keo. Even so, on the 2nd the next day, Satoru still picked up Keo at her house so they could go to school together. After school, he invited her to his house to celebrate his birthday. Coincidentally, she also has a birthday on the 2nd, so they celebrate their birthday together at his house. After the party was over, Satoru decided to take Keo back to her house. He stayed until midnight in front of her house to ensure she would be okay. His actions made him so exhausted that he was late for class the next day. Even when Satoru was late, Keo still hadn't come to class, much to his surprise. She never came to school that day, even until the last lesson was over. In a panic, Satoru rushed to Keo's house as soon as the bell rang. However, he couldn't find her anywhere, which meant she ended up being kidnapped despite his efforts. And worse, the same sequence of events as 18 years ago begins. Nakanishi Aya, who was the third victim, also disappeared like Keo. In fact, they had been killed. A few days after Keo's disappearance, Satoru was walking home when he saw Akemi throwing away a plastic bag the crows gnawed at. He didn't have to check the contents of the plastic bag to know what was inside. He knew what it was, and he felt angry at himself for failing to protect the 3 victims. However, Akemi was not Keo's killer, nor was she the killer of the other 2 girls. What actually happened was when Keo came home from a birthday party at Satoru's house, her mother beat her before locking her in the shed beside the house. Afterward, a man entered the shed early morning and killed her. It was only in the morning that Akemi found her dead. Overcome by panic and fear, she hides Keo's body for several days before mutilating her. Finally, she threw the pieces of Keo's body in the trash. However, Satoru didn't know about any of that. He screamed when she saw the plastic bag and ran. He kept running and screaming until suddenly his revival was activated and took him back to 2006 when he was being chased by the police. He might even have been caught if he hadn't met Katajiri Eri, his co-worker at the pizza restaurant. Eri is a kind-hearted girl by nature, and she believes that Satoru couldn't possibly have killed his own mother. So, she decides to help him by hiding him in her house. While hiding, Satoru discovers that his intervention in the past has slightly changed the present. He reads a newspaper that contains information about the incident 18 years ago, and from it, he learns that Keo was kidnapped on March 2, 1988, while originally she disappeared on the 1st. Not only that, but the information also shows that she was murdered at 11, in which case she died when she was 10 years old, before her birthday. Satoru also looked at the list of names of suspects in his investigation. However, of the 10 names on the list, he only recognized 2, Yuki and his father. Even so, he tried to remember all the names. He was sure that if he could go back in time, he would be able to save the 3 girls. At the same time, the killer knew that Satoru was hiding at Eri's place. So, he called the police and reported it, allowing the police to arrest Satoru. Satoru had seen the killer as the police led him away, but he couldn't do anything about it in this situation. He could only hope that he would experience revival again. Fortunately, his wish came true. He goes back to 1988 when he and Keo visited the museum. Satoru was determined not to repeat his failure this time, considering this could be his last chance to change everything. He enlists the help of his friends, Kenya and Hiromi, to take Keo to the child care center in the afternoon. Not long after, on Satoru and Keo's birthday on March 2nd, after confirming that Yuki was innocent, he broke Yuki's window and asked him to call the police to get an alibi for Satoru's whereabouts that day. After that, Satoru still invites Keo to his birthday party at his house. But instead of driving her home after the party ends, he takes her to an abandoned bus. He planned to hide her there for at least 3 days so the kidnapper wouldn't find her. After 3 days had passed, he would call the Child Protection Center so they could separate Keo from her evil mother. Of all Satoru's friends, he only told Kenya and Hiromi about his plan. However, on the 2nd day after Keo stays on the bus, a suspicious person enters it. That person seemed angry, as seen from how they kicked the box inside. In these seconds, she can only stay silent while trembling in fear, hoping that person doesn't find her. Luckily, she wasn't found. The next night, Satoru and his friends return to visit Keo on the bus, and she immediately informs them of what happened last night. Curious, they checked all the items on the bus until they finally found a cardboard box containing duct tape, rope, scissors, and freezing spray. Kenya and Hiromi had no idea what these things were for, but Satoru, who was actually 29 years old, knew very well what they meant. Whoever brought those objects onto the bus would have used them in the kidnapping. Realizing that Keo would not be safe if she stayed on the bus, Satoru decided to take her to his house. Fortunately, Sachiko welcomed her into her house and allowed her to stay. The next day, Satoru and Sachiko drive Keo back to her house. Akemi is angry that she hasn't been home for the past 3 days. She even slapped Keo in front of them to vent her anger, not knowing that they had come together with Yashiro and the people from the Child Protection Center. After seeing how she treated her daughter, consultants from the Child Protection Center finally suggested that Keo be taken into custody. When Akemi was about to protest, Keo's grandmother came and stopped her. She explained that Akemi often beat Keo because she was also often tortured by her ex-husband. Besides, she was frustrated because she had to raise Keo alone, so she took her anger out on Keo. She regrets being unable to help Akemi after her divorce from her ex-husband. Therefore, to make amends, she decided that she would take care of Keo. With Keo leaving to live with her grandmother, Satoru turns his attention to 2 other potential victims, Hiromi and Nakanishi Aya. In Hiromi's case, Satoru could keep an eye on him quite easily since he was his classmate. They are even close friends who often go together. Satoru prioritized Aya, who attended a different elementary school. He first tried to figure out Aya's daily routine, and after he learned that she took extra lessons at the cram school until the evening, he secretly followed her to her house. Because, after all, the kidnapper most likely carried out his action at night. However, when Satoru followed Aya one night, he ran into Sachiko, who had just come home from shopping. She asked Satoru to help her carry the groceries, forcing him to abort the mission to tail Aya. Luckily at this time, Yashiro happened to pass in front of them and offered them a ride in his car. Along the way, Satoru and Yashiro chatted about various things until he realized something was sticking out of the car glove. And to his surprise, he found a lot of candy in it. It turned out to be a stock of sweets that Yashiro had kept on purpose because since he quit smoking 3 years ago, he's been addicted to candy. At least that's what he claims. The next day, Satoru asks his friends to accompany him in approaching Aya, as he thinks it will make it easier for him to befriend her. Unexpectedly, they could become friends with her with relative ease, much easier than he expected. She even often hangs out with Satoru and the others after cram school. However, Satoru didn't complain about it. This way, he could keep an eye on Aya and Hiromi simultaneously. He even believed that he had succeeded in protecting them from the killer. Still, that didn't mean the killer would just give up. There are many other children besides Aya, Hiromi, and Keo. Satoru realizes that the killer's potential victims are children who are somewhat aloof and quiet or have problems in their families. And there is one child who meets those criteria in his class. Her name is Misato. Misato was originally a cheerful and talkative child. But, after Satoru snapped at her for slandering Keo, she turned gloomy and quiet, as if she were a different child. And so, Satoru decided that he would watch over Misato after school this time. Apparently, he was too late. Yashiro had taken her away to watch an ice skate match at a stadium, so Satoru couldn't help but follow her there. Arriving at the stadium, Satoru found Misato sitting alone, with no sign of Yashiro nearby. She then went to the toilet, forcing him to wait for her outside because, well, there was no way he could follow her in there. Satoru waited for her to come out for the next few minutes, but strangely she didn't come back, making him think she had been kidnapped. He was even more worried after discovering that she wasn't in the toilet. Another worse part is that he saw Yuki's car passing in front of the stadium. Previously, he was sure that Yuki was innocent, but his name was still on the suspects list. During his panic, Satoru met Yashiro again. He then asked Yashiro to let them chase Yuki's car. And so, they set out to chase after Yuki using a stolen car. Yes, you heard right. It's a stolen car. Along the way, Yashiro finally revealed that he was the one who wanted to kidnap and kill the 3 students. In fact, he used Misato to lure Satoru to the stadium, for he knew Satoru was the one who had thwarted his plans. He still didn't know how Satoru could predict his every move. It was as if he had come from the future. Hearing Yashiro's confession, Satoru remembered that he saw Yashiro's name on the list of suspects. But since his own mother's name, Sachiko, is on the list, he begins to think that the list is not reliable enough to be used to find the culprit. Regret seemed to start to seep into his mind. He felt like an idiot because he should have realized that Yashiro was the killer when he saw that there were so many sweets in his car. However, it's too late now. Not long after, Yashiro intended to kill Satoru by drowning the stolen car in a lake. At that moment, there was nothing he could do because Yashiro had broken the seatbelt he was wearing, making it impossible to remove. The reason Yashiro kidnaps and kills the children turns out to be because he is influenced by the supernatural. He claims to be able to see spider threads over the heads of certain children. and he was sure that such children would bring him bad luck. Now that he was about to kill Satoru, he could see spider threads above his head. However, before Satoru sinks completely, he reveals a bit of his secret to Yashiro. He said that he knew what the future awaited Yashiro. Satoru's words seemed to pique Yashiro's curiosity, so he decided to save him. Still, he swallowed much water before Yashiro brought him to the surface. Moreover, it was snowing, causing the lake's temperature to drop drastically. As a result, Satoru fell into a coma for 15 years. He just woke up in 2003, when he was 26 years old. Worse, he lost his memory of what happened before he drowned. Fortunately, his memory could return after Kenya, Hiromi, and Keo visited him. Turned out that Keo is married to Hiromi. She even took their child to the hospital. Anyway, Satoru told his friends about everything, including the one who had put him in a coma for over a decade. Not only that, but he also asked them to help him trap Yashiro. A few days later, Yashiro visited Satoru, who pretended to be still lost in his memory, in front of him. Yashiro then took him to the hospital roof. Soon after that, Satoru finally revealed that his memory had recovered. Hearing that, Yashiro immediately asked the thing that had been bothering him for a long time, which was, why was Satoru able to guess all of his moves and even thwart his plans? In response, Satoru slightly told Yashiro about his secret. He also revealed to Yashiro that he would kill his mother in 2006. After learning all that, Yashiro threatens to knock him off the roof of the building and make it look like he ended his own life. However, Satoru wasn't afraid of his threat because, after all, he knew Yashiro couldn't live without him. And that was true because Yashiro couldn't even kill him despite being in a coma for the past 15 years. Sure enough, when Satoru pushed his wheelchair to throw himself off the roof, Yashiro tried to stop him. He admits that he couldn't live without Satoru, though he let go of Satoru's wheelchair, causing him to fall. Yashiro then got ready to jump off the building, but to his surprise, when he looked down, he found Satoru still alive. His mother and his friends caught him using a large mattress. Satoru's plan ends up being a great success. Yashiro is arrested by the police for attempted murder. With this, Satoru finally managed to change the past and the future. By the end of the anime, several years had passed since that incident. In this future version, Satoru doesn't work part-time as a pizza delivery guy. Instead, he became a successful manga artist, and one of his works was made into an anime. After that, Satoru meets Eri again, even though she doesn't know him because the past has changed. Indeed, the past and future had changed, but he did not regret it. Because he has saved his mother and friends, and feel grateful for it.